What is the only FDA-approved drug for binge eating disorder is Vyvanse, which is, as we know, ADHD medication. Hoarding, which has been typically looked at in the OCD spectrum. We're finding that one of the most primary factors that predicts hoarding behavior is executive dysfunction. ADHD can kind of lend itself to a lot of different things.
It's your gateway disorder.
It's your gateway. Welcome to the Attention Different podcast. Today we are joined by Dr. Roberto Olivardia. He is a Harvard Medical School lecturer and McLean Hospital clinician who specializes in ADHD and co-occurring conditions. On today's show, we're going to cover why with co-occurring conditions, you must treat the ADHD first before tackling anxiety, depression, OCD, etc. Dr. O is also going to share his son's dyslexia story from struggling with basic reading in kindergarten to making the dean's list in college while studying pharmaceutical science. Dr. Olivardia is not just a special guest. He's much more than that. He is a collaborator, a mentor, and a dear friend. Aaron and I have known Dr. O for over a decade now, and we have had the distinct pleasure of attending his incredible lectures on several occasions. So please trust me when I say, this is an episode you won't want to miss. Let's all remember to breathe. We got this.
This is the first ADHD test, right? Do you hit echo cancellation before you hit record? Remember to do it. That's the working memory. Go ahead.
This is the Attention Different podcast. My name is Stephen Tonti, and with me co-hosting is
Aaron Smith.
Hey, Aaron. And today we have an extremely special guest. Why do I throw the extremely there? Because Roberto Olivardia goes way, way back in the way, way back machine for Aaron and I. When Aaron and I first met and started ideating about Attention Different, this company that exists today, Roberto was one of those early mentors, one of those early lecturers that we sought out at the ADHD conferences because his information and his insights are truly second to none. You are in a league of your own. I'm going to pass the mic pretty soon to Roberto and Aaron, but I just wanted to tell our listeners that this is a really special day. We love Dr. Roberto Olivardia, and today we're going to be talking about something really specific to Roberto's work and his life's work, which is co-occurring condition research. Some of you may have heard this formerly as comorbidities. Now we use the term co-occurring conditions, and Roberto is our in-house expert for the day. So Aaron, take this mic away from me before I keep eating it.
So I just want to do a little intro. So Dr. Roberto Olivardia is a clinical psychologist, lecturer in psychology in the Department of Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and a clinical associate at McLean Hospital. He co-authored The Adonis Complex, his first book of its kind detailing male body image issues. He's a featured expert for understood.org. He has appeared in publications such as Time, GQ, Rolling Stone, and VH1, CNN, Good Morning America, featured all over the place and has spoken on numerous webinars, presentations, and talks and conferences around the country. Dr. Olivardia has lived and experienced ADHD and learning differences. He's the father of 2 children with ADHD and dyslexia. Welcome, Roberto.
Oh,
Welcome.
Glad to be here. It's always great talking to you guys.
Same.
All right. So to jump in, before we hit record, we were talking to you a little bit about your children and who have dyslexia. And that's one of the co-occurring conditions that we want to talk about today. So could you just tell us a little bit about how your children first got flagged for dyslexia, and what are some of the challenges for folks who may have a co-occurring learning disability like dyslexia and ADHD?
Sure. So first, it's important to know, 50 to 60% of people with ADHD have a learning disability or learning difference. So
Wow.
in
50,
my
50 to 60?
50 to
These
60.
numbers always bewilder me too, Aaron.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Yeah.
So in my opinion, any student certainly who has ADHD should be screened for learning disabilities, and every person that has a learning disability should be screened for ADHD, because when you have something that has a 50 to 60% co-occurring rate, that's very, very high. I would say that most of the time, actually, the learning difference is under-identified. I mean, as we know with ADHD, there's a lot of under-identification. Learning disabilities are even more so, especially when ADHD is in the mix, because a lot of times it can look as if it's part of the ADHD, when the ADHD certainly could be exacerbating that issue, but is very different than the issue itself. So that's the first thing. With dyslexia, to also just briefly define it, because I'm a child of the 80s, where the ABC after school specials, which you can find them on YouTube, the first time I heard that word was an after school special. River Phoenix and his brother Joaquin, who was like 3 at the time, played these kids, and River's character had dyslexia and he read words backwards. And I didn't relate to that like at all. And I knew kids who we didn't call, the awareness of it was like close to nothing, back then. But that was my impression of what dyslexia was. People read words backwards for years. And even through grad school, and this isn't an indictment of my education, with other colleagues of mine, we didn't learn about learning disabilities, and even ADHD. As common as it is, there's still a lot of, we need to sort of do better training, in doctoral programs and whatnot. So that was what it was. Now, in my personal experience, I was never a big reader. Reading fatigues me very easily, but it was never something that sort of got flagged or whatnot. I navigated it through. I never read a book from cover to cover in high school. I was good at skimming things and sort of getting the passages, and then having ADHD, I get bored very easily. So if it was a boring book, forget about it. Like that was like a non-starter.
Amen.
But I always felt there was something more than that, like even later in life when I understood ADHD a lot more. So fast forward, I have 2 children who are now 20 and 18. Don't ask me how that happened. I can't even believe it, but it is.
That's shocking considering when we met you, they were not teenagers.
Yeah, they were like little ones.
That's crazy. Okay.
Crazy. So my son, who's now a college sophomore, on the dean's list, who's doing phenomenally. He's majoring in pharmaceutical science, and he was in his kindergarten class, and his teacher said, his alphabet, sort of a lot of the alphabetic principles, he's not sort of grasping very quickly. And my son was an early talker. So he was the kind of kid, and both of my kids also have ADHD, but he was the kind of kid that he could hear a word. And I would purposely do this. Like I would say words, like my sister's a very verbal person, like it runs in the family. So I remember saying, oh, auntie is quite loquacious. I would use these like SAT words and, kind of go on. And then the next day, my son would say something else, and like someone in his class, and he's like, yeah, and he was talking all the time. He's loquacious too. And I never defined the word for him. And I'm like, wow, how do you know what does loquacious means? He goes, someone who talks a lot. How do you know that? He goes, oh, because you said about auntie, and basically he was saying I got it through the context,
Yeah.
And he was, and I would purposely like throw words in there, and he would always get it like through the context. So high vocabulary, very verbal. He was not on my radar for dyslexia. My daughter, which I'll talk about in a second, was on the radar. ADHD in the womb, I could have diagnosed my son. Like with ADHD.
They were bouncing around.
I kid you not, guys. Every time we had an ultrasound, I kid you not, every single time they're like, whoa, he's active. Like and he bust into the world. Like his birth was like, it was just, I had music, I would make these CDs, during the birth, and when it was pushing time, I had Enya, and the nurse is like, what? This is like music for the dead. We are about to push a baby out. Like you need some. And I was like, oh, okay. And put on the radio. And of course, Welcome to the Jungle, Guns N' Roses.
Oh my God.
So my son was born to Axl Rose singing Welcome to the Jungle.
Yeah.
So fitting.
And you were trying to play Enya, like this, like very zen, like, okay, let's be relaxing. Let's bring the child into this great space.
Yeah.
Shanti.
No, this nurse, she was phenomenal. Her name was Marcia. She was awesome. She said, this is good music when you're, as you're building up the labor. But she goes, she was blind, and I needed this. She goes, "This is music for the dead." She was a short, redheaded woman, and I was like, "What?" Like I'm like, "Don't we want that nice Zen Enya?" No, we need rockin' music. Your wife is about to push out a baby. Like, we need something. I was like, "Oh, okay."
Driving.
At his head coming out, it was "Welcome to the Jungle," and his name is Roman, and he fits that name 100%.
Wow. Hey, attention different fam, we've got an e-course for you. It's called Thriving with Adult ADHD. If you've ever felt stuck starting tasks, overwhelmed by managing your energy, or unsure how to build routines that actually work, this course is for you. Again, that's Thriving with Adult ADHD. Inside, you'll learn practical strategies to help you focus, strengthen your relationships, and feel more in control of your day-to-day life. With over 2 hours of video lessons and an 80-page workbook, you'll walk away with tools you can use right away to not just survive, but thrive with adult ADHD. Head to attentiondifferent.com now to get started.
The dyslexia, he wasn't grabbing what we call automaticity. And so part of dyslexia is it can manifest in different people in different ways, but it's a combination of a lack of phonemic awareness. So we kind of learn that things that we call letters are associated with certain sounds. The letter B has a B sound. We just learned that. That's actually not evolutionarily, that does not go way back. I mean, like, written language and sounds is actually fairly new kind of in our evolution. So in some ways, it's the more when you learn about dyslexia, the more it's kind of remarkable that most people are not in some ways, like that we sort of grasp these things.
Yeah.
So he was not, a dyslexic person doesn't have that quick automaticity, despite the fact that they could have good processing speed, like, for not due to intellectual capacity or whatnot.
Yeah, it's not correlated with any type of intelligence, like how intelligent you are. Yeah.
Absolutely, not at all. And in fact, like, sometimes those are the kids that can get identified is when there is that split between their intellectual capacity and their reading levels. Like, wait a minute, someone at this
Oh, the
IQ,
misalignment makes it more obvious.
It makes it more obvious.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That makes
gap.
sense.
Because, and especially with him, because he was such a communicative speaker, and she was like, and she was right on to something. And I knew, with all the stuff that I knew, I was kind of already going to do the full neuropsych because I knew the ADHD was there. Right. But then it became more obvious. Like, then there's also how you segment syllables, and dyslexic individuals don't always segment syllables in the obvious ways. Like, so we learned that teacher is like teacher. Someone with dyslexia might say teaker. And now that's a different word,
So they kind of break it up, segment it differently.
Exactly. And so there isn't, and then there's the blend. So if you learn that so starting with AT, if you know that that's so that's the phonemic, but now with blending sounds, that automaticity of AT is at. And once your brain kind of can almost see those two units as one unit, and then the alphabet quickly, now you can easily be like bat, fat, hat, mat, nat, pat, rat, sat, tat. Like, it's like boom, 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 boom.
Right.
But to someone with dyslexia, that at is not this one unit. Every time you see that word, so if it's BAT, it's B-at. Like, it takes that time to sort of process it. And then if you put cat, it's a whole new word. It's almost like, it's not like, oh, here's the same structure. We're just substituting this one thing. A dyslexic person is like, oh, it's like a brand new word. And the word fat, it's a brand new word. So if you imagine now, as we read, we're coming up against alphabetic and phonemic awareness principles constantly. So if your brain has to process all of that, that can take a lot of time to do.
And they have to, like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they have to kind of like memorize some of those things, like every word, the uniqueness of each word, like they're memorizing that.
Yeah. And there are then words, especially in the English language, that don't follow principles, so the word the, for example, is not phonetic. So it's not he, it's not the, it's the, like of OF. It's
Right,
not
classically,
off,
yeah.
it's of. So that's where you really see difficulty, because now there's not even a phonemic principle. So I remember, Dr. Seuss, who we all love Dr. Seuss books. Dr. Seuss books are phenomenal books to teach sort of phonics principles, because he makes up words, but they're based on phonemic foundations. So if he's like, the zlink is in the sink with the bink, well, sink is a real word, but zlink is not a real word.
But it acts like one.
But it acts like one, because if you know ink, I-N-K, you can just follow the principles. Dyslexic kids have a very hard time with Dr. Seuss books. They can't, because they've never seen the word before. So for some dyslexics who never get diagnosed, they might end up compensating by just memorizing basically whole words without learning those principles. So when they read, they're kind of just almost like taking 3 or 4 times more energy, to get through it. And then spelling is often one of those things that never gets better for someone with dyslexia, despite interventions. And frankly, doesn't have to. We have spell check and such. But my son, which I find actually it easier, he spells totally phonetically when he's writing. So knife is N-I-F-E. Like, what's with the silent K?
Right. We got to get rid of silent Ks and pennies.
Yeah, like what's a silent P in pneumonia? Like, I mean, I don't know. But so spelling, and then it can affect handwriting. So all of this was happening. So I had him tested, and he had what's called double deficit dyslexia, which is where he had very poor phonemic awareness and what they say poor rapid naming, where that automaticity. So his journey was every summer, and I mean, this kid, I'm so proud of him. He had to be in some summer school, some program, some intervention specifically for dyslexic kids. He was in public schools, but he was on an IEP, and in the early years, not because he was the only dyslexic in his school, but he was the earliest identified dyslexic. It was one-on-one, him with this teacher. And I remember explaining it to him when he was in first grade. He was a big fan of Shark Tank, and 3 of the sharks on Shark Tank are dyslexic. And that was a big win. And I'm like, you're in good company. And I said, I don't know if daddy, I certainly didn't relate to the extent that he had it, but the ADHD was, talked about. And we got involved with an organization called Decoding Dyslexia, which does a lot of advocacy work. And when he was 10, he testified in the Massachusetts Senate to the Department of Education to advocate for including dyslexia in IEPs. I mean, we really got involved, and now he's a college sophomore studying pharmaceutical science and on the dean's list and totally at grade level. But it was a journey. I mean, his college essay was about really navigating that.
Well, yeah. How could it not consume your life? I mean, that's what you're describing. And I think this is an important pause point for our listeners, is that we tend to forget, or we tend to not forgive ourselves as much as we should, that like when you sort of healthily and even ferociously take on the mantle of kind of relearning how to learn, or learning a completely new way to learn than most folks, right? Because of the condition, that is 3x, 5x, 8x extra labor on our brains and our bodies. Your son's life was so much more complex than an average kid during the summer and during the after school. I mean, like, it's not just I'm stacking sports and theater and music, whatever. It's no, I have to do this thing so that I can maintain this grade level with y'all, because my IQ is there, my intelligence is there, my EQ's there, but this functionality is making it really, really challenging to stay at pace with you guys. So 100%. I hear that nobility in it. Like, he did the work, capital T, capital W.
Oh my gosh, did he do the work? I mean, I could honestly cry just thinking, I mean, just how, because I tell you, I would not have been as compliant as he was. if my parents said, Roberto, you have to do some summer program, I'd be like, no, like,
does it involve 1 and 2 drumsticks? Because that's the only thing Roberto's doing.
Exactly. With dyslexia, and the problem of when it's not identified is there's this term called the Matthew effect that's associated with economics, like the rich get richer, poor get poorer.
Right.
With dyslexia is that gap becomes exponentially larger as the years go on.
Oh my gosh, right.
All the sort of non-dyslexic kids are learning to read, and they're being exposed to words at their level, and then that's building them up. And then at 5th, 6th grade, you're not learning to read, you're reading to learn. So
Right.
education flips. And which is why the age group that we see when people are identified is typically in 5th and 6th grade, because then it becomes obvious, oh, wait a minute, this isn't just a slow reader. This person cannot keep up. And unfortunately, if dyslexia is not identified, it gets associated with, oh, well, maybe they don't belong in the top level class. Maybe they belong in the 3rd or 4th level class.
So they get stunted. Yeah,
they
their
get stunted.
Growth. Yeah.
Exactly. And as a parent, obviously you have to be your child's, biggest advocate. But and we had a very good relationship with the school. But of course, there are some difficult moments where I'm like, oh, no, he's going to be in that honors bio class because he is a science kid. Like, just because he's dyslexic and needs a lot of accommodations, that's not why we bump him down. We would bump him down if he doesn't have that capacity, then that's one thing. But no, the capacity's there.
Let me ask you something about that, because this is something that comes up for my parents a lot. In my practice is, the more intelligent the kid is, seems like the more the school pushes back in giving the types of interventions and accommodations or even qualifying them for an IEP. A lot of times in my experience, the schools are pushing back and saying, like, if they're able to get a grade or to kind of to skate by in some way, because of their compensatory strategies, natural intelligence, the schools just kind of like almost refuse a lot of time to give the types of testing or interventions that person needs. Have you seen that too? And what can we do about it? What should we know about that kind of stuff?
Yeah, that's such an inverse.
It's absolutely true. So when a child is failing and getting Fs, there's no question, like clearly, no one can argue that there's some intervention that's needed. But who gets sort of sometimes missed in the mix are those kids that have a certain capacity, have certain compensatory strategies, have certain familial support. Where,
like if a mom is really spending 5 hours on the homework with the kid and being like, we're getting this done, but it's taking an exorbitant amount of time. And the teacher in the school doesn't see that.
They don't see that. Absolutely. Now, in my son's high school, he had to take a foreign language, and we fought this, and he has to take a foreign language to graduate. And many dyslexic kids have a very hard time with foreign languages.
Understandably so. If they're working on at, and someone's like, okay, so now we're going to do present participles in Spanish. Like,
exactly.
Excuse me. Yeah.
Exactly. Now, interestingly, a lot of dyslexic kids would have an easier time with Mandarin languages or American Sign Language than they would with, let's say, the Romance languages. Because the thing, and we could get into this too.
Symbols?
The symbols, the things that can make reading difficult could actually lend itself to other things that could be made easier, like music, which I could talk about in a second. But with foreign language, we took that course, Spanish 1 and 2 together. And it happened to be during the pandemic. So it was actually quite convenient, honestly, because he had a lot of projects. It wasn't tests. And I helped him. I'm like, you shouldn't even be having to take this, but he ended up getting A minuses. But in his college application, he wrote, I want you to be aware. And it turns out his major doesn't require a foreign language requirement, but just in case with some of the schools, I cannot take a foreign language. These A minuses I had to basically do quadruple the amount of work and time to achieve that, with a lot of support and a lot of help. Like,
he wrote this in the application.
Oh yeah,
that's such an honorable disclosure too. That's bold. Thank you, Eric. That's bold.
He's like, I worked basically, my butt off, for it, and that's not sustainable. He's like, so don't even think I'm going to be taking a foreign language.
I hope those accepted, the people in the office of acceptance, right? They were reading this like, this kid is so mature. This is so
knows
self-aware.
Himself.
Yeah.
But that is exactly, Aaron, what you're describing is very true, because I'll have clients that I work with who are getting Bs, let's say, and a B is a great grade, but their capacity is A level, and that B is taking them so much more time than it should. And like you said, the teachers don't always see, and this is part of it. And I'm not demonizing teachers. This is why we have to always have that open communication, because I tell parents,
Yeah.
you need to let the teachers know if your kid is melting down at home, if the school needs to know that.
Yeah.
Because they're not seeing that.
No.
Exactly. Especially if you have a kid with a high EQ that, that could be perfectionistic, that like my son's a very ambitious kid. Like, so you wouldn't know. And he's a very happy kid. Like he doesn't, it's not like he went to school miserable. And so we had to sort of communicate to the school, like, just to let you know, this assignment that he got, it took this, I would literally time it. Like, this is how much time it's taking him. They'd be like, oh, that's like way too much time. I'm like, I know, but I had to.
Yeah.
I love the moment of discovery. Teacher, look, oh, this is way too much time. What have I been saying?
Yeah. And I said to them, I'm like, look, I'm sort of a researcher at heart. So I don't think that I was going to have him spend 2 hours doing this 2-paragraph thing, but I needed it to happen once for data. So now we have to figure out how to modify it. And there are a lot of great tools, and things like that.
So just to emphasize this, it's kind of like what parents need to understand is it's the impairment is kind of a relative term, especially for the highly intelligent kids. If they, just because they're getting a B doesn't mean, oh, well, they're fine. They're getting, above a C. They're not suffering here. No, that's not impairment. It's relative to their ability and to where they should be at based on other, their intelligence and other things. So we have to kind of look at it relative to that rather than
absolutely
just the grade itself that they're getting.
Yeah, because even in neuropsych measures, and we see this with ADHD as well, that you can have someone who has, let's say, a high in IQ and their working memory or processing speed might be in, like, I just did a consultation of super bright kid, like 98th percentile in this, and 99th percentile in this, 130 IQ, which is two standard deviations above average. And his working memory and processing speed was in the 30th percentile, 30th to 40th. Now that's considered average. So by neuropsych measures, like he was like right on the cusp of almost below average, but it was in the average sort of range.
But
so
not for him.
The school said,
no,
he's an average. And his parents are like, how is that? And I'm like, no, let me explain to you what this is. If you have a car that is built to go, like, can easily drive at 90 miles an hour, and you are taking a trip, you're driving from here to Chicago at and let's assume that you can drive 90 miles an hour in terms of speed limit and everything. So you are having a plan, okay, 90 miles an hour, I'm driving 10 hours a day. It's going to take me X amount of time to get to Chicago with traffic and whatnot. And let's say you hit traffic jam after traffic jam after traffic jam. It's going to be like, oh my gosh, what I thought would take me, 2 days is going to take me 6. Versus, let's say if you have a car that can drive max at 40 miles an hour and you're planning to go to Chicago, well, your expectation is going to be different. And let's say you're stuck in those same traffic jams. It's frustrating for anyone to be stuck in traffic jams. But if your expectation is, I'm going to be somewhere in 2 days and it's taking me 7, that is a very different experience than I'm planning on 5 and it's taking me 7. It's a very different and intrapsychically.
I do too. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
These students feel it. And certainly as far as ADHD goes, I definitely intuitively understood that. Even when I had no idea what ADHD was when I was a kid, that it was so internally frustrating to get through certain things that I'm like, why is this, like, that confusion of trying to understand? So to that kid, it absolutely is relative. And they don't even have to know, it's just like ADHD is the worst kept secret, in some ways. Like dyslexia is as well, in the sense that although some people can go years without that label, but they know there's something internally that's like, it's just gearing the wheels and the amount of work, that it would do to sort of to read through something. And, my son is a learner, like he loves to learn. And so if he was going at the pace of his actual ability to read, he would never have exposure to that sort of higher end stuff. So absolutely, to parents who are listening, it's about the relativity, because the stress is felt by that gap, regardless of whether that gap
we're going to feel
brings
it.
you down.
We're
to
going to
a B.
experience it.
You're going to feel it. Exactly.
Yeah. And as a parent, you have the right. You have to advocate for your kid. If you know, hey, this
100%.
isn't right. If you feel it in your gut, this is not right. My kid should be, doing better here. This is taking way too long. I'm putting in too much effort into their homework time and getting them to do this stuff. This is a daily battle. Those are all very relevant signals, and you know yourself, you know your kid the best.
Yes.
Don't let the school tell you, oh, no, sorry, they don't qualify for this. Like, no, they do. There's federal laws, right? The Americans with Disabilities Act, like, they have to give your kid those accommodations. They have to give them an IEP or a 504 plan and give them those appropriate interventions. That is on the school.
100%.
Yes. Let's frame this real quick before we inevitably and organically, I hope, segue. David, our producer, asked a really good question or framed it in a way that I really like. If you could go back in time right now, Olivardia, and give baby parent Olivardia a crystalline piece of advice pertaining to all of this, what would that be? I'm going back in time 18 years, maybe it's 15 years. And what is that advice that new parent, Roberto, would have loved to receive on this journey, at the start of this journey?
I feel very good about our process. I think it's probably to just expose myself more, just to kind of educate, myself even more about it. But I feel pretty good about identifying it. I think it's the advocacy.
Yeah, this also could go to another parent, not an Olivardia, because if I may laud you, of course you stepped into your power as the you that you are, and your wife. Like that's awesome. And if what's that? Maybe that crystalline piece of advice that like listeners out there could use.
To parents, when I talk to parents, it's what Aaron said. A lot of times with dyslexia, it's kids read at different paces, and that's true, but your child best, and there's a difference between they may be needing time to catch up, and like there really hasn't been progress in 6 to 8 months, and their peers are now being exposed to more vocabulary words and liking reading more because of that, and we're seeing sort of a decline. But the advocating is important, and it's we always want to build a collaborative relationship, with schools and with teachers. And at the same time, more so than even with ADHD, that with dyslexia, that often always requires an IEP, which means that kid needs a different educational lesson
program.
Program. Like my son needed dyslexia trained, because it's not just more time with the reading teacher. You need
it's not just tutoring.
Not just tutoring. It's empirically validated intervention in reading programs for kids with dyslexia. And you need a staff, you need teachers that are trained in that, which means this, that comes down to sometimes dollars and cents. And interestingly, and I have to say to Aaron, to your point earlier, sometimes it's the commute. Like I live in Massachusetts. We're, I would say, a very, very good state with stuff like this. But sometimes the communities that actually are wealthier in the state are the ones that have the least services, because sometimes there's the expectation of, you can kind of put your kid in a private school. There are 2 schools in Massachusetts that are catered to kids with dyslexia. They're excellent. My son did a summer program at one of them, but the tuition is $50,000 to $60,000 a year.
Right.
So unless you get an out of district placement, which some kids do, if a public school says we cannot meet your child's needs, then you can, and a lot of times it might involve working with an attorney as well, have an out of district placement where the town will pay for, your child to go to that special school because they're not able to get access to that education.
Yeah. And also for parents, just to let parents know here about the timelines under the IDEA Act, or the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. With an IEP, it's 30 days that they have to develop the IEP. And then it's for the initial evaluation. And sometimes the in-house evaluations aren't good enough, right? The school psychologist or person evaluated isn't good enough. Maybe they didn't flag it the first time. That doesn't mean, we can't do anything else. They have to pay for an outside evaluation if you advocate for that and don't think that evaluation was appropriate. And that has to be done within 60 calendar days. So what I hear sometimes with parents is that they don't request this in writing with their school. And that's very important because you want that paper trail. So if you think your kid needs to get evaluated, you have to submit a letter to the principal, to the disability coordinator, to the vice principal, tag all these people and submit this letter to the school, because that gets the timeline rolling. It's not just having the conversation in person at a parent-teacher conference or seeing them in the hall and saying, oh, yeah, Billy's been struggling here. I think he really needs this. That doesn't start the timeline. You want that kid to get evaluated, you have to submit that letter in writing.
I like that. Start the timeline. No, that's because we as ADHD listeners as well, right? We need that. What's the firing gun? What's the starting gun? So just to get the project going. So such valuable advice, right? Like, it's not a conversation at the water cooler. I like how you put that, Aaron. It's like, no, you need to send a letter. It needs to be a formal,
definitely,
invocation, right?
Let's segue a little bit into, this is great information about dyslexia. Just give us like a overview, a shotgun perspective of all of the different types of co-occurring disorders, that 50 to 60% you mentioned earlier, because I'm still on that. I'm thinking, okay, what are the other ones that people should be on the lookout for, and what are some of those percentages and top co-occurring conditions with ADHD?
I always say, ADHD rarely travels alone. So to me, it's the rule rather than the exception and in fact, studies show that most people with ADHD have 2 to 3 co-occurring conditions. So having ADHD can lend itself to wonderful things and strengths, and it can also be a hotbed of slippery slopes of other things. So about 20% of people with ADHD have a mood disorder, and that includes depression, includes bipolar or bipolar spectrum disorders. 30% in anxiety, significant anxiety or an anxiety disorder. That can include things like obsessive compulsive disorder, which surprises people but 30% of people with OCD have ADHD. And we think of them as opposite conditions. They're not as opposite as people might perceive. Anxiety can also be things like generalized anxiety disorder, which is like the worry disorder, social anxiety, phobias. Then you have the stats of, let's say, if you look at substance abuse disorders, that people with ADHD have a significantly higher risk of any kind of addictive behavior. So, when my kids were little, I would start the conversation about Oreo cookies. I'm convinced there's crack in the cream of Oreo cookies.
The double stuffed Oreo
bring it on.
It's laden in something.
Bring it on. Yeah. Like, I remember meeting a kid in college who said, "Oh, I don't like Oreos." I'm like, "Are you human? Like, what are you talking about? Like, those things are like perfection." But I would basically, in starting the dialogue for later, having conversations with them about things that are not Oreos, to say, hey, having ADHD, when we like something, we can like it a lot and too much. And I recognize that in myself. And when they were younger, was like, with Oreo cookies, Daddy, I have to be careful because I like them. And then of course, as they get older, we're talking about substances and alcohol and gambling and porn and, you name it. Like, so we have a significantly higher risk. I mean, to the degree that that's also a population that if for clinicians out there or parents who are listening, if you have a child or a client that is struggling with a substance use disorder, I think screening for ADHD should be a given, because we see the rates of cannabis dependency, alcohol, vaping dependencies is so high. I specialize in working with boys and men with eating disorders, and there's a high comorbidity of ADHD, not so much with anorexia. So with anorexia, we see more OCD co-occurring with anorexia, although I have treated some men with ADHD and anorexia. But however, with bulimia nervosa, which is when people engage in binge eating episodes and then purge either through self-induced vomiting, laxative use, overexercise, that's bulimia or binge eating disorder, where they're binging but not purging, highly comorbid with ADHD. And I remember years ago speaking about this in eating disorder conferences and saying, look, there's preliminary research showing that stimulant medication for someone with ADHD and bulimia or binge eating disorder can be very effective. And that was not met very well. I mean, because eating disorder community looks at, stimulants look as
To
an
keep the weight
appetite
down.
suppressant.
Right.
Exactly.
Like a drug, they look at it as like, this is a illicit thing.
This is a thing that's in service of the eating disorder. And I'm like, no, that might be the case for people who don't have ADHD. And then of course I'm explaining what ADHD actually is and whatnot. And the information and the research caught up. And so what is the first right now and the only FDA approved drug for binge eating disorder is Vyvanse, which is, as we know, ADHD medication. So, we can fall into any of those co-occurring conditions. We don't have sort of statistics, but I also work within OCD, specializing in OCD, but also in what we call the body focused repetitive behaviors, or BFRBs. And that includes things like trichotillomania, compulsive hair pulling, dermatillomania, which is compulsive skin picking, and other habits like nail biting, nose picking, cheek biting. Those diagnostically have typically been associated with more the OCD and OCD spectrum, and we're finding that that's also highly comorbid with ADHD. Hoarding, which has been typically looked at in the OCD spectrum, we're finding that one of the most primary factors that predicts hoarding behavior is executive dysfunction. So ADHD can kind of lend itself to a lot of different things.
It's your gateway disorder.
It's your gateway. Yeah. Well,
it kind of is.
Well, kind of. Wait, on exactly that note, Aaron, brilliant. On exactly that note, I remember. So going back in the way back machine into one of those days, and we will circle all the way back at the end. I won't let us leave here without asking the I am versus I have question. But in that same lecture, Olivardia, where I asked you about I am versus I have, you were talking.
I remember that
bipolar and ADHD.
Yes.
And you brought up the concept of the 800-pound gorilla in the room, right? Which was really important, I thought, to comorbid or co-occurring conditions. Which condition demands treatment first, right? And so when I hear Aaron say ADHD, the gateway condition, right? In your experience with these comorbidities and these co-occurring conditions, for instance, I find that I interact with ADHD anxious or ADHD folks in my communities very often. That's the world of professional storytelling, in various other lifestyle groups. ADHD and anxiety shows up a lot. So with regards to somebody who has a severe anxiety disorder and also ADHD, I know that folks will tend to treat the anxiety first and then the ADHD second. In your experience, where does this show up and how does it play out?
It's a most common question. And when I give trainings and to clinicians, the thing I always say is untreated ADHD not may, but will undermine the treatment of anything else that you're treating. So you're either treating the ADHD first or you're treating it with the co-occurring condition. To me, that does not make sense whatsoever in the idea that we're going to treat this one thing and ADHD is sort of running amok, because I've seen it. I'll give you a stark example. Many years ago, worked with this young 20-year-old male, sweet guy, for OCD. It's severe OCD. And he told me, he said, look, I'm hesitant because I've been fired by 3 therapists before. I'm like, fired for what? And he's like, they would say I wasn't motivated enough, that I wasn't looking to change. And this OCD is ruining my life. Absolutely. We'll work together. So first session, he's late. He's 45 minutes late for a 50-minute session. And he looks like distraught, by it. Yeah. And he's like, oh my gosh, I meant to be here on time. And I believed him. I'm like, I'm like, well, we have 5 minutes. Let's see what we can do in 5 minutes. So second session, 45 minutes late. Third session, and I'm like, okay, this isn't just... So I would ask him, are your rituals... Because I have patients that don't have ADHD, that just have OCD, who are late for things because they're stuck in their rituals.
Right.
Yeah. Is this your ritual?
OCD ritual.
OCD ritual. And he said no. And his OCD did not play out in the morning with the kind of how it manifested. Yeah. So it was not OCD whatsoever.
It's not the OCD getting in the way of making him late.
Not at all. So he's talking to me. And as someone with ADHD, I mean, we have good ADHD radar, as we all know. He's like, I was coming and driving and my gas tank went on E and it was empty. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's going to break down. And it was steaming coming out. I mean, like these dramatic stories. And he was accurate. I mean, these things, or I just realized like I didn't pay my rent check, and if I didn't pay it, so I had to write the check there, and then I had to deliver it to my landlord, and blah, 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 like all of these things. And I had asked him, I said, had you ever been evaluated for ADHD? And he's like, nope. And he was a straight A student in high school. In college, he did well, but it was really, I mean, again, this is why we always have to find the story behind the symptom.
Yes.
He did well on his report card, but behind the scenes, oh my gosh. I mean, like he deserved a medal for talk about compensatory strategies. And so, make a long story short, I did the clinical evaluation, and not only did he have ADHD, but it was pretty clear that he came from a long line of family members that also had undiagnosed ADHD. So I said, we have to work on this executive functioning of the time management. And I wanted him to know I am not going to fire him. I said, the problem is they were not treating the thing that needed to be treated first, frankly, is you have to be present. And I know you want to be here. I said, I can see the distress that the OCD is causing in your life. So he's like, how do we do that? So we worked on time management. And then I remember the first time he was only a half hour late. And I gave him a high five, and I said,
success.
Yes.
And he felt good. And I'm like, we have now 20 minutes. And then there was the time I opened the door, and it was it was like 4 months, and he was in the waiting room. And you guys can appreciate this, but a lot of people don't understand, like for him, it was like a whole world opening up of like, and then I don't prescribe. So I have a colleague who he was prescribed, and he was hesitant about, he's like, I don't know, like, am I going to get addicted to it and whatnot? And it was about 3 months into work, and because, they're very trial friendly, and he was like, oh my gosh, he goes, I cannot believe what this, and it did not exacerbate his OCD. It can for some people, but for him, he goes, if anything, I feel like the OCD is sort of in the background, like it's not as prominent because I'm actually more present than I've ever felt. And then we started working on the OCD. And I work with many people in recovery. If we're not working on the ADHD, guess what? Dr. Tim Willens at MGH has done a lot of great research of ADHD and substance abuse. The risk of relapse is higher. Right. I mean, executive functions are just such a cornerstone of everything, of living life. Yeah. So, yeah, that's a sort of long answer, but it's so...
No, that is, first of all, shut your beautiful mouth. That's a perfect and concise and beautiful answer. And I want to underscore something because I'm over here crying listening to this. That's what I'm doing. I'm muting my mic and getting emotional because you reminded me why I love you so much, Roberto. You're like Oliver Sacks. The story behind the symptom. He did not get fired from 3 therapists. They failed him.
Yes.
3 therapists failed to get the story behind the symptoms. I've heard you tell countless anecdotes identical to this where you were the first person in some poor soul's life who is desperate to feel sane, who said, I will give you 3 extra minutes. I will give you 5 extra minutes. I'll give you 50. I don't care because I'm curious about the story behind the symptom. That's what's more important to me than getting $1 and getting you out of the room. So that's what I'm hearing in this actually is your incredible power and strength and the incredible amount of need out there. The demand is so high and the supply of Olivardias and Sacks is so low, is so painfully low. The people who are willing to sit in that room. You told one story in your personality disorder lecture, one of my favorite of all time, of I think it was a woman who was like 12 out of 10, violent and cursed and would throw chairs around. And the way that you just sat at your desk and said, honey, you are able to do whatever the fuck you want. This is a purely radical acceptance-based space. You can't beat my curiosity, actually. You can't beat it. I will still be curious after the 10th session and the 20th session. So this is my moment to say, God bless you, Dr. Olivardia. Thank you. Oh, that's so Thank you for being that 4th person that he needed. Right? Yeah, like just to be curious.
Yeah, and I get emotional thinking about him because he, I don't work with him anymore, but every Christmas he sends me a Christmas card. He's a dad now, and I mean, that's like the privilege of doing this work, and it's amazing. But it happens so often, like where, I've worked with people in recovery who have been told, oh, you're not ready to to embrace recovery. When it's like, no, like I can think of multiple people, but I'm thinking of one person in particular was told that stimulant medication was a violation of his sobriety.
Yeah.
And this is someone with ADHD. And it revs me up just like in hearing that.
Right.
Just like with the dyslexia that we often say to kids, like sometimes it's the issue is that they're not getting the needs, it's like dysteachia, like they're not getting the sort of right education. But I feel that way about a lot of these clinical examples of like stimulant is not a violation of sobriety for someone with ADHD if that's helping them manage the ADHD and their impulse control and their need for dopamine. And I mean, and this is where the work that you guys do and the work we all do in our community, at the conference is so important because many medical professionals do not understand ADHD. Many mental health providers do not understand ADHD, even though ADHD is not a mental illness, but the fact that it can be an accelerant in symptoms of mental health conditions. And for something as common as it is, the training does not equip to that. I mean,
it's not there
at all.
Which is why I have to insert and say another compliment to Aaron for the record, because you're not getting out of this one. You're just compliment circle. I wouldn't be co-founders with Aaron, Roberto, if I didn't see another Olivardia and Aaron, period.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I know the stories that Aaron has shared me, the horror ones, again, clinical horror stories of just total disassociation from or distancing or just looking right over or past somebody, like through a human being and being like, wait, I thought this whole brick and mortar place was built to help these people. I'm very confused. That's sort of that burn up that both of y'all feel. I'm moved by that. So I laud Aaron as well to keep fighting the sort of the thick with two C's ego that comes into this work that should be absolutely out of the room. Again, I go back to Oliver Sacks, but he understood intuitively this person coming into the room is not my puzzle to solve. This person is a human being who has family and has a partner maybe and has a story. 100%. They have a story behind them, and whatever I'm doing is going to have an indirect effect on hundreds.
Yeah, we have to treat the person first, and then it's like, okay, what's the disorder, what's the symptoms, what's the diagnostic picture here? But yeah, it's like you have to look at the individual, you have to look at the person. You can't just see them as a set of symptoms.
Well, and also, I mean, and this is where when we're talking about comorbidity, there's so much misdiagnosis because you have a lot of associated disorders that can mimic ADHD. So although let's say you have a certain amount of people that have ADHD and bipolar disorder, and I can't tell you, I've done numerous consultations of people who have a bipolar diagnosis who do not have bipolar disorder. They have ADHD and or vice versa. People that they have the ADHD and I'm like, no, this is a bipolar, the beginning of a bipolar spectrum disorder, or people that have both. And this is again where we have to go behind the story. Now, interestingly, when I was in graduate school, we learned, different assessments, and the MMPI, is one of them that looks at different personality traits in this inventory, and we fill it out and learn how to do it. And I was off the charts in hypomania. Which is not going to be surprising for people who know me. In grad school, where I did not have an ADHD diagnosis in grad, like ADHD came in like my early 30s, where that name like,
oh, wow.
So, So my cohort, there were 6 of us in my doctoral program, like they would just refer to me as like hypomanic, but they'd be like, but you don't get the depressed part. But I'm like, okay, I guess I don't know. Like yes, I have a lot of energy. I can be very intense and, procrastinate and all that. But I remember, and this is a good example, like with something like mania, like if you ask someone, have you been awake for more than a day, 2 days, 3 days without the aid of caffeine and not feeling necessarily tired, I would answer yes to that.
Right.
So I was up for 3 days once without any caffeine, 3 full days. Now, that could easily get a check mark in the manic box, or let's get the story. The story was senior year of college. I did a senior honors thesis on men and eating disorders. I was very proud of it, collected all the data, did all the statistical analyses. Mid-January, all I had to do was now write it. It was due end of May. Well, we all know what happened. Like,
oh, this sounds like a setup for a perfect grand slam, a home run. Nothing went wrong.
Nothing. So I'm like, everything is done. All I have to do is write it. And writing is a strong suit. It takes me a while to get into it. But then once I'm there, move out of the way, my fingers will be sore, So time is ticking. And it is 3 days before this is due. And this is a hugely important, because I have to have it in and then I have to defend it and then to graduate, you know? And so like any of us with ADHD can relate to, it was almost like somebody then like injected me with adrenaline. I called my family and I said, look, I am putting my phone off the hook. There were no cell phones back then, so you can't text me. I'm okay, but I cannot have a moment to talk to anyone. My friends knew. My friend Nick, who lived next door to me, we had these they call them friendship singles. He would bring food to me like I was a prisoner, like literally leave it outside my door.
Slide it under the door?
Yeah. And knock so that I wouldn't have any distraction. So I would eat because I had no time to go to the dining hall. I literally would hold my bladder until I was about to burst because I'm like, oh my gosh, like to pee was too much of an interruption.
Which of course is just super more serotonin and more dopamine. You're
absolutely.
more adrenaline.
So I am writing and writing and writing and writing. And it was almost like time was just, before I knew it was 3 days. Now your mind does pretty crazy things after 3, like I was sort of hallucinating that it's this weird feeling like I didn't see mice, but I would get the sensation that a mouse just ran by me, if that
like
makes
floaters.
sense.
You were seeing floaters.
Yeah, it was almost like paranoia. It would be like something visually, like you know how in a cartoon when the roadrunner runs really fast and is like, that's what I would see. So I'm like, but I have to get this done. And then I remember my friend Nick, after the 3 days, he, knocked and he came in and he was like, I looked out of it, but he's like, why don't you just take a nap for like an hour? And I'm like, no, I'm like almost, done. And, I wrote this thing and these were the days before the internet. You have to get it in the professor's mailbox. So I'm running across campus, getting it. I pass it in, 168 page, thesis.
168 pages in 3 days.
3 days, yeah.
Which, by the way, at which you say hallucination, you say cute mice, the United States government considered you legally drunk after the 48th hour. So you weren't allowed to operate a motor vehicle when you finished this.
Oh, no way. And I remember coming back and I was like, I'm going to just quickly stop in the dining hall because I was hungry. Went to the dining hall, went to my room, conked out, and that was, to this day, the longest I've ever slept.
How long did you sleep?
Yeah.
I slept, I think, almost 20 hours.
Oh my
20 hours.
Do you think there's like little Dr. Olivardias in there having Mai Tais on a beach? Like, do you think there's a win? You know what I mean? Like they're sleeping, they're just like, cheers.
I mean, it was nuts. Like I remember it was like noon because it was 10 a.m. I had to submit it in, and then I ate. I think I conked out at noon and I had woken up at like 8 a.m. the next morning. I thought it was the same day. I was so disoriented and so like, it took me like a little while to calibrate, but I had to get that thing done. And then guess what? I won highest thesis awards. My brother's like, only you would win the highest thesis award in the psych department. And it was my first publication, the American Journal of Psychiatry, first author publication.
Hey, yes,
for this eating disorders. It was huge. It was really, I'm so proud of that, but it was nutso. And like, but that was not mania. That was pure ADHD. Now, not everyone with ADHD can do that. Like some people would shut down and be like, oh my gosh. But that's a good example of the story behind, the symptom, because I understand if someone didn't hear the story, to be like, yeah, that sounds like total manic behavior.
Yeah, if they looked at just that slice, just that one slice. And like you said before, like with substances too, this is the other thing I see. If someone's on some kind of substance, sometimes they'll get diagnosed with, schizophrenia or bipolar or something else where they're hallucinating or they're staying up. But it's like, okay, well, if they were on meth for
or
days
DMT, if they're like smoking DMT all the time. Yeah.
Or they're on DMT. Something else that's like causing hallucinations or, impairing sleep or impairing other things. That's why, a lot of times it's, we shouldn't be diagnosing if someone is under the influence of something until they've detoxed to get a full picture.
Right.
But that doesn't always happen. Right.
So complicated and nuanced.
But one other thing I wanted to say too on your story, because I think while we highlighted the challenge there of like, okay, my executive function challenges of procrastinating and leaving it to the last minute and having this magical thinking of, I'm a great writer, I'll just get this done. And in some ways it was true. You did get it done, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But at what cost? And
yeah.
So that was the challenge part. But then there's the strengths, right? And I think we have to always, I want to end on this note too, just on kind of a more positive framing, right? ADHD, bipolar, dyslexia, all of these conditions we've kind of went through, their strengths as well as the challenges and weaknesses. And I want you to kind of speak on that a little bit of just what are some of these strengths that people have?
It's an interesting question because there's it's almost like a bit of a debate even in the ADHD community around like a gift. Is it a curse? Is it,
Right.
I look at it from like this Buddhist perspective of like, it just is. And do I believe everyone who's creative has ADHD? No, there are lots of people who are not ADHD, and there are a lot of people with ADHD that are not particularly creative. However, I do believe, and certainly in my experience, and my son wrote about this in his college essay, that there is something though about the experience now, and I always preface it, when it has to be managed and treated to really get the gifts of it in that sense. Because if you're out of control, if you're not stable, then you're not going to really access those gifts as much. So that's always the first preface. And frankly, even to clients, and to some people who live with these conditions, sometimes that can feel invalidating to them to say, oh, you have this gift. And meanwhile, they're like, I'm getting fired from every job. Like, this is no gift. I remember this young kid that I worked with, so funny. Oh my gosh. If he doesn't end up as a stand-up comedian, I don't know. He was so funny. But he's like, I read, and I think he was talking about Hallowell. I saw this, he said, this old guy, talk about ADHD as a gift. If this is a gift, mine sucks and I want to return it.
I want to return it.
He goes, but I have ADHD and I don't return things. I mean, he was like at 12. He's
I
saying
forget
this.
to return it.
He is a comedian.
That's
how bad it is. Yeah.
We don't return things. I'm like,
no, we don't. No, we
don't. And I'm like, at 12, he was, oh my gosh, so brilliant. And I said, you're absolutely right. I said, but when we can harness that and treat it, then, because the image I always tell people, and my kids too, it's like a coin. You can't separate the heads and the tails. So I attribute my successes and a lot of the ways that I am in the world and think about the world and process to this ADHD brain. I feel empowered by the term ADHD. I don't feel pathologized by it or stigmatized by it. And I attribute the slippery slopes, the darkness, the crazy situations that'll be in a memoir one day to the same ADHD brain. It's just, you cannot separate it. It's like impossible.
Two sides of one coin.
Yeah. Two sides. So things like, a strength, like creativity. For me, and this isn't the case for everyone, but being bored, the flip side of being bored is I have pretty incredible imagination. When I was a kid, I would be so bored out of my gourd in school that I would start writing, things, and I would write stories and I would win like the writing festival, like all the time, and these writing awards, and people like, how do you come up with these ideas? And I'm like, I'm just so bored in class that this is I didn't even think of it.
Stimulate my brain. Keep myself engaged.
I'm so bored. And it's like, that's how this kid wins awards.
I didn't even think of it as a strength. I just saw it as like, this is just a way of surviving.
No, it's a solution. I mean, like, that's the part that gets the other artists in the room annoyed, right? Like, for you, it's like, no, this is a solution to my boredom. Yeah. And you're like, wait, this doesn't drive you at night. This doesn't keep you up. No, I'm pumping as much as I can.
But you hear that. You hear that so much from like musicians and artists and actors, right? Why do you do this? Oh, I do this because I have to. I'm being compelled to do this because of whatever. It might be depression. It might be anxiety. It might be ADHD. It might be bipolar. But sometimes, and it is, we can't say this is all the time. Everybody with the condition, with the disorder has a gift, right?
Right.
No, but sometimes, and I would say probably if I would argue here, this is my soapbox, I would say probably over 50%, I would say, do have some sort of compensatory opposite side of that coin, some type of leverageable skill or attribute that if they had the right parent supports, the right coaches, the right teachers, the right mentors, the right support systems in place to train that, to harness that gift.
100%.
And that,
100%.
or that strength, not necessarily a gift, right? But that strength, right? That it can turn into someone that is gifted, right?
Yes.
Then it can become something. But like you said, it's all about treating the executive dysfunctions and ADHD first.
Definitely. Because I feel even with what I do, like I don't call this my job because I love it so much. And the word job when I was growing always had this connotation like, ugh, like who wants a job, you know? But it's like for me, I credit this brain for my hyper focus on and my empathy and hyper focus of people and relationships. And I grew up in a house where I had wonderful parents. They both have passed, but neither of them were religious, but very spiritual in the sense like when you had said, Stephen, a while back of the indirect. When you're working with someone, the indirect help that helps all those other people. My dad was an educator. He taught Spanish. And I remember asking him, what made you want to teach Spanish? I said to people. And he said, oh, no. He goes, I was like 13 or 14. He goes, I teach people. He goes, Spanish is just like the vehicle. For me, I'm connecting with people. I'm relating to people. And I'm just basically like a conduit that if I can help people have an expanded way of communicating with more people, being a foreign language, because he taught at Berlitz School of Languages. So he'd have clients. So like Polaroid, the camera company, was one of his clients, the Boston Police Department. He had this convent of nuns who were doing missionary work in Latin America. He says, I'm teaching people so that the Boston Police Department can communicate better with Spanish-speaking individuals, that these nuns can do the great work that they can do, it was so profound. And I got it. When he said that to me, I was like, I totally understand that. And my mom, if she had the privileges that I had growing up, would have been an amazing psychologist, social worker. She was probably the most highly emotionally intelligent person I've ever met. Like she just, to the point that honestly, like I kind of thought she was psychic, like at one point. And my mom's favorite quote, and I started her eulogy with this. She's like, I might be wrong, but I know I'm right. And the truth, guys, she really was always right.
But deference, though. I mean, but humble. I might be wrong,
yeah, very. My mom was. I could do a whole stand up on my mom. She was. The ADHD came from my mom, but to that point, and to what we're talking about, strengths. My mom grew up in the south of Brazil, in this town inhabited by a lot of German Jews, in the 1930s. She had to quit high school because her dad died when she was very young, and she had three. It was her brother and her quit high school to support the younger siblings, and her mom, who was wonderful, who I never met. And my mom was cleaning the house of this couple who was very educated, and the husband was going to study at MIT here in Massachusetts. My gosh.
Okay.
And my mom said, and the wife was pregnant. She said, could you sponsor a visa or whatever it takes, and I'll be the nanny to your kid? And her family thought she was a little crazy. And my mom
presumptuous.
was presumptuous. Yeah. And my mom was fierce. She was the sweetest person, but don't get in her way. She was fierce.
I can see where you get it.
Oh, thank you.
And we can see where Roberto gets it. Yeah, you are the sweetest, most ferocious person I know.
No, my personality is 75% my mom. And her family's like, you don't know any English. You're not educated. You're a young woman going what? And she's like, this is not where I'm going to be able to have a family. And I want my kids to go to college. And I want she grew up very, very, very poor. And so she did. She learned how to speak English by watching soap operas, because they're so dialogue driven.
Yeah.
Never took an English class, and she spoke really, good English. And she had 3 kids that went to college, and one I was the least likely to get a PhD, and I got, a PhD. And when ADHD became something I understood in my life and with my kids and everything, I would explain to my mother, and I remember her, and she would tell stories. I mean, it's hilarious because when my mom was 10, this is what I grew up with that also made me not pathologize some of the craziness that I would get into as a kid. She told us a story. She goes, I used to love to climb trees, and especially as a girl, that was not seen as like ladylike, She goes, I didn't care. She goes, I can climb them faster, than boys. And she goes, and one day I saw this thing hanging from the tree and bees were going into it. And she goes, I was curious. So she put her face and tried to look inside a beehive and got stung by like a bunch of bees. And her mother was like, what are you doing? Like, what would make you think of that?
From top down, why are you climbing trees? Why are you investigating beehives with your face?
and a new dress, because they were so poor. She had her school clothes and her non-school, and she was climbing a tree in the new school clothes dress. Breaking all these rules. And she said, I was curious. I wanted to see what was. And so hearing those kinds of stories was actually really validating, because I was a very curious kid and did sort of those kinds of things. But when I said to my mom, that same ADHD, what we're calling ADHD, because my mom said, we would all call each other electrica. Like, we're all electric in our family, like electrica. I'm like, that's a good way of calling it. ADHD is electrica. I said, the chutzpah that you had to just say, you know what, I'm going to go to this country and figure it out. And it was not easy for my mother, like at all. Like, she had, it could be worthy of a book at some point, because I wrote all the stories down. I said, that same chutzpah, like that to me is almost the intolerance or quote unquote impulsivity of I'm going to jump out of my skin, and that having no risk aversion at all and just sort of going. But hey,
also good pattern recognition. Also, extremely good pattern recognition. She ID'd the couple that had the highest potential for saying yes. Yeah, she had that, she's like your yes impulse, but also extremely, extremely fast, crunching, intuitive,
totally
crunching the numbers. Yeah.
100%. I said that's that same thing, Ma, and that was help because she felt like, did I pass on like some disease? Like, when I was explaining, I'm like, no. I'm like, this is how. But I truly believe that same brain is what brought my mother, to this country. I believe, creative problem solving and those kinds of things. And with dyslexia, one of the things I remember reading when my son was diagnosed was, if your kid can learn a musical instrument, that can really help with their neural pathways in the brain. Done. So he started taking piano lessons. There was this woman in our neighborhood who taught piano, and he was a very high energy kid. And so not all, I remember putting him in gymnastics. His first gymnastics teacher was a little bit overwhelmed by him. And I'm like, come on, like, who doesn't want to jump on I want to jump on the trampoline. It's like, how can you sit these kids down for 10 minutes of circle time? Like, let's wrap it up, let's get on the trampoline. But when he took piano, he wrote, I'm talking musical notes, his first song at the age of 6. And I'm not going to brag. It was called I Love My Daddy, just saying. And then his second was I'm working in a factory. I'm crushing these steel pennies. I have the notations and everything I saved. But his music teacher said he is unusually good at recognizing like these notes. That's not usual, she said, like with a lot of kids. Well, it turns out that the thing that makes that sound letter recognition difficult actually make the sound symbol recognition easier, because the brain is not as wedded, like a non-dyslexic brain. The brain is so wedded to sounds being letters. And in some ways, what makes reading hard is the brain is almost saying, it could be this or this or this or this or this. That makes reading the alphabet maybe difficult. But now with the symbol, it actually is like, you're saying that symbol means that sound, done. Yeah. And he took to that so quickly. And she was like, it's quite amazing. Like he took piano, I think 6 years. He didn't like to practice, but he loved meeting with her. She was a lovely woman. And my daughter similarly also took, piano lessons. But that's that, again, that kind of neurochemistry that might make something hard could make something else maybe a lot easier.
How exciting.
But it starts with, we have to always first identify, manage, and treat that, that ADHD, give that dyslexic kid the interventions, that the educational remediation that they need. Because when my son was diagnosed, I said to my wife, I could care less if he reads War and Peace or gets through Shakespeare. He cannot think he's stupid. Because first of all, I don't believe anyone is stupid, but he cannot think that this has anything to do with his intelligence. So that is what I was all about, was I don't care really if you're the fastest reader or whatever, but with a lot of these kids, unfortunately, it can kill their spirit, in that way. And at the same time, once you get them in the venue, and we know this for ADHD folks, once we're in our arena, watch out, because we'll be the last ones to leave the office. We'll be the hardest working person in the room. We'll be the one with the biggest and the longest amount of perseverance, because we're so into what we're doing. And it's not an accident that the entrepreneurial world, the creative world, is filled with people with neurodiversity. I mean, it's so common.
Shocked to the brim.
That's why I'd like to emphasize the strengths also, because I think so much of the time it's not to minimize the challenges. Really, what it is it's to emphasize, hey, this is not a curse. It's not something that has to be the thing that holds you back in your life. Yes, it can be challenging, and it can be very daunting to get the help that you need. And that's not an easy path, right?
No.
However, it's important for us to also recognize that we are in company, good company, with a lot of folks out there that aren't talking about their struggles and their co-occurring conditions and their ADHD and all sorts of other conditions. They're not talking about those, but we are in a company with a lot of people who have done some amazing things. And I just want to highlight one person based on what we've been talking about with dyslexia. So Deborah Rhodes was a physician who helped with developing the MBI, the molecular breast imaging technology that improved breast cancer screening for women. And she's known to have dyslexia. And so that thing about the pattern recognition and being able to see through things.
Yes.
Lots of other people would look at these scans and not see it. They wouldn't see where the cancer is. But her brain automatically, boom, right there. She's like, yep, that's the cancer. Got it. Yeah. So it's not a one-to-one. It's not because you have ADHD, you have a gift. Because you have this thing, you have a gift. It's not a superpower. It's not this thing that I think gets mischaracterized out there. But what it is you have that two sides of the same coin. And we have an opportunity of where do we put the energy and the emphasis, especially this goes for kids and parents. Do we put the emphasis on, what you can't do and where you're struggling and where all your problems are? Or do we put the emphasis in, hey, I see these potentials in this strength in piano and in, all these other areas of your life. And let's put some emphasis there. And let's get you the help for the other things, right? Let's get you help and interventions.
Right.
But let's emphasize those strengths, and that can really build confidence. And I want people, even adults out there who are listening to this, to remember that is like when we focus on the deficits and what's going wrong and what we don't have in our lives, we can make ourselves a lot more miserable than when we focus on what we're grateful for and what are some of those strengths and capacities we do have. So whether that's problem solving,
100%.
Whether that's creativity, whether that's the pattern recognition we're talking about.
Maybe it's that you're like a St. Francis. You hang out with animals all the time. You're really temple grounded, right? You're really good with empathy, high compassion.
High empathy, absolutely.
High insight, yeah.
And with that too is when people can be aware that not only that they have strengths, but also that they have strengths not always despite the ADHD, because, of that, then the goal is, especially as adults, when we have options of what arenas we go into after, typical schooling, is trying to find something that capitalizes sort of on those strengths. So, my daughter who has ADHD and dyslexia is an athlete. So her, I mean, she is on that softball field, her it's like boom, boom, like she's just like, it's
Totally.
just so
Flow
locked
state,
in.
hyperfocus. Yeah.
Total flow state. And she's going into nursing. So she's got accepted to a bunch of schools. She's a great student. And she said to me, and this is what I love is, it's like, oh, when we were early on in the process, what do you think you want to major in? She goes, well, I can't be bored and I have to be on my feet and I want to help people. And I think nursing is a good thing because and she's very good at memorizing protocols and things like that. She was always the first kid in her dance class when she was young to get the choreography done. She has such a great kinesthetic intelligence.
Totally.
And she said there's the relational piece of it, but then you have to learn a lot of cool stuff. And there's a lot of medical knowledge that I'm interested in. And I'll never have the same day twice, just like you, Dad. It's just a different arena. And I'm like, hallelujah. That is like, those are the proud moments when you're like, oh my gosh, that's what it's all about.
Just like you, Dad.
You figuring out this is what I'm good at. And I have no doubt she'll be good at it because she's such a bright, she's just charismatic and so positive. And so that's what you want, because how many of us know, and I've certainly have had clients who, they have a hard time at their work. And yes, ADHD can rear its head in anything. And sometimes the treatment is you need a different job. Like you're not in the right environment.
Yeah.
That's like, yeah, we can try to make this work, but unless there's some compelling reason, or reason that you can't make a switch. And sometimes that's what I've done. And people like, oh my, like almost even giving them permission to say like, this is the arena I really need to be in. Sometimes it's just that mismatch, in that way. And for folks with ADHD, that goodness of fit model applies more. It just does. Like, there's no way, like, I feel I'm really good at what I do. And I could name a lot of things that I would not, that I'd be dysfunctional at. Like, really not good at. Like,
so you're not dreaming to be an accountant, right?
Oh, no.
Yeah. Like nuclear physics, something about the surface sounds great, but like having to understand all of the machines, dials, knobs, and everything, different. Yep. Nope. Too much responsibility. I don't want to have.
I just met with my accountant last week, and there's this ongoing joke because in 2021, my other accountant retired, and she's became the new one. And we were meeting in her office, and she's so nice. And she's going through, and she has this big computer monitor with the Excel spreadsheet and these numbers. And guys, 5 minutes in, my eyelids feel like I have weights on them. I'm falling asleep. I'm arm's length away from this nice woman, and I'm literally nodding off like I'm on a meth or something. It was so bad. And I had to interrupt her. I said, I'm sorry, I just have to interrupt you. And I said, I have ADHD. And I said, like, I'm not like, oh, I'm ADD. Like, I really have ADHD. And it's just, I am so thankful, I said to her, that you do this for work, because there's no way I could do. And she had a sense of humor about it. She goes, oh, I know I'm a nerd about these things. I'm like, no, please be a nerd about it. Because I said, I don't want you to take it personally, though, that I'm literally falling asleep. Do you mind if I stand up for the rest of the meeting? And I did.
Aaron, does this sound familiar? Maybe a co-founder of yours behavior when it comes to meeting with our CPA.
Every time I mention numbers, Steven's eyes glaze over and he's like asleep in moments. That's
me. I'm with you, Steven.
No.
I'm with you, buddy.
Aaron watches me slow.
Stay with me. Yeah. Stay with me, Steven. Okay, come on, Steven. Line number 2. You sell 2. You see this?
Okay, honey, we're in February. We got a lot more months to go. We have a lot more months to go.
No, I kid you not, guys. Like, my tolerance for boredom it's definitely worse than it's ever been. Now, the good part of that is because I'm almost never bored.
Yeah.
Like, I could have a long day and I love it. Like, I'm never leaving the office like, oh my God, like what a day. Like, and I do a lot of hard work, but it's so purposeful and meaningful. And so when I'm meeting with the accountant, it's almost like my brain, that muscle that I had when I was younger, that I had to get through an 8-hour school day, is
gone.
So gone that within minutes, we met with her on Friday, and I literally looked like the typical hyperactive third grader. I'm like, moving around and fidgeting and like adjusting.
Everyone's like, Roberto, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. What are we talking about?
Like I'm like, and I have cold water I'm sipping. Like I'm like, and it's a 30-minute meeting. And
my Lanta.
It's so, oh my gosh. But then again, I tell my adult patients, if I didn't tell her that, then that could be a really awkward situation.
Yeah.
I might avoid going to the accountant, or she might feel bad. And I'm a very empathic person. I don't want her to feel. So I'm like, let's just lay it out there. This is what is going on. This has nothing to do with you. This has everything to do with me. And as long as you're okay that I'm going to stand up, and she's totally cool with it. Done. It's not an issue, in that way. But
we could have probably 5 or 6 false endings today. And that's because there is an anecdote to service every question that I've ever had. So again, I must give a nod for our listeners. This has been Dr. Roberto Olivardia, who is to this day one of the most impactful, impressive, and stimulating people that I know in the world of complex mental health and human behavioral biology.
At least boring lectures you'll ever hear. Yes.
Boring lectures you'll ever hear. Which, by the way, for the ADHDers out there, when you sit in that seat and the PowerPoint comes on and it is black and white text, no images, the first thought you have is, there's no way this guy is like, everyone talks about this guy's like a rock star. What are we talking about? And then he starts talking and you're like, oh, I haven't stopped looking at his eyes for 2 hours because it's just, the way in which you invite us into the allegories, invite us into the narrative so that we can experience in the way that we primate monkeys are supposed to, right? We relate emotionally and empathetically to the subject of the story and suddenly fireworks go off. And if we've got a major takeaway, I know that a big answer for a question for me today was which do you treat first? And it sounds like in your experience, ADHD, if not first, together, right? Like it's that executive functioning issues, those issues with addictive personalities, all the impulsivity, the compulsiveness, those situations are going to exacerbate the other gorilla in the room. And it's important to be honest about it and track it and ID it. So in this crazy wrap up, I again say, thank you so much. We are
my pleasure. Love talking to you guys. Let's do it again.
We will.
Yes, we'd love to. We'd so love to.
Our producer, David, has said we absolutely have to have Roberto on again. And before we let you go, this is the pluggable section for people who have more of an influencer presence online. That's usually their podcast or their show or this, that, and the third.
Yeah, or your book or where people can get a hold of you.
Yes, so I have no social media presence. So I always tell people the old-fashioned way, if anyone has any questions, my good old email, Roberto_Olivardia @HMS, as in Harry, Mary, Sally, .harvard.edu. But if they want to find content, if you honestly put my name in YouTube, there are a lot of lectures that I've done that are on YouTube. Attitude, as Aaron, you had mentioned, I'm on the board for Attitude. I contribute a lot of articles, podcasts, webinars, which are all free for the public. So if you go on their website and type my name into the search box, there'll be articles, podcasts, webinars on cannabis, borderline personality disorder, eating disorders, a lot of the stuff that we've talked about.
Incredible. Yeah. This thought came to me about 20 minutes ago, and I can't help myself because I am a career producer and story mom. So if you are looking for that title for a memoir, I don't say the memoir because I think you're going to have a few. If you're looking for the one with dyslexia and ADHD, the title, I don't care if he ever reads War and Peace, he cannot think he's stupid, is an incredible title for a book about dyslexia and ADHD. So that's something that came out of your mouth. That was a very beautiful sentence.
Oh, thank you.
That is the last gift that I'll give you because you've given us so many today.
Thank you so much. This was amazing.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure, guys. Thank you for what you're doing too. And first, congratulations on all of this. I mean, you guys are a living testament of you met at the ADHD conference, which we can all agree is an amazing place for any listener to go to. If you haven't gone, this year it's in Kansas City, Missouri. You will feel a palpable energy of community and support and humor and seriousness at the same time. I mean, we take this seriously, but we also have a great sense of humor in the ADHD community. and for what you guys have created. I feel privileged, like just witnessing sort of just how this all evolved, and the gathering you guys had at the last conference, which was so much fun. So thank you for having me, and the work that you guys do, because it's getting the word out there. We're all in this boat together.
Yes. This is a collaborative board game, not a competitive one.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like that. That's a great line. I like that.